Jack Trice was the first black athlete at Iowa State University, playing tackle in only his second collegiate game against the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis in 1923. The night before the game, Trice wrote a letter to himself, later found in his coat pocket, vowing to prove his worth on the field despite the hostility he expected as a black player in that era. During the game, he attempted a rolling body block and was crushed under a pile of Minnesota players. He initially believed he had only suffered a shoulder injury and insisted on continuing to play through the pain, a decision that likely worsened his internal injuries. He collapsed the next day. Doctors found severe internal injuries, including a ruptured abdominal cavity and internal bleeding that could not be stopped by the surgical methods available at the time. Trice died 2 days after the game, on October 8, 1923, at just 21 years old. For decades, Iowa State's role in honoring him was inconsistent, and it took a sustained student-led campaign in the 1980s and 90s before the university formally renamed its stadium after him in 1997, making Jack Trice Stadium the only NCAA Division I stadium named after a black man. His letter, which included the line, "My whole body and soul are to be thrown recklessly about the field," is now displayed at the university and is read aloud before every Iowa State home game as part of a pregame tradition. Lane Frost was one of the most beloved bull riders in the sport's history, known as much for his sportsmanship and friendships with rival riders as for his skill. In 1989, at the Cheyenne Frontier Days Rodeo, he had just completed a full 8-second 85-point ride on a bull named Taking Care of Business. As he dismounted, the bull turned unexpectedly and hooked him with a horn, striking his back and ribs. The blow severed an artery and caused catastrophic internal hemorrhaging, though onlookers initially assumed he had walked away unharmed. Frost stood briefly, appeared to wave to the crowd, then collapsed. He was rushed to the arena's medical tent and then to a hospital, but the internal bleeding was too severe to control. He died within the hour, at just 25 years old. His close friend Tuff Heidemann was the one who identified his body, an event later dramatized in the 1994 film 8 Seconds. Bull riding organizations cite his death as a turning point that accelerated the adoption of protective vests, which are now mandatory at most competitive levels. The Professional Bull Riders organization, founded a few years after his death, still awards prizes at Cheyenne named in his memory, and the bull that struck him was retired from competition immediately afterward. Philip Hughes, a young Australian batsman with 26 test caps, was playing a domestic Sheffield Shield cricket match for South Australia against New South Wales in 2014. Facing a bouncer from bowler Sean Abbott, Hughes turned his head to avoid the ball, but it struck him on the unprotected side of the neck, just below the base of the skull, an area sometimes called cricket's kill zone, because helmets of that era left it exposed. The blow caused a vertebral artery dissection, triggering a fatal brain hemorrhage. Hughes collapsed immediately on the pitch, and players from both teams, visibly distressed, attempted to assist him before medical staff arrived. He was airlifted to a Sydney hospital and underwent emergency surgery, but he never regained consciousness and died 2 days later at age 25. His death prompted cricket's global governing bodies to mandate helmets with extended adjustable neck guards known as stem guards, now standard at every level of the professional and amateur game. Bowler Sean Abbott, who delivered the fatal ball, took an extended break from cricket afterward and has spoken publicly in later years about the psychological toll of an entirely legal delivery causing a teammate's death. Hank Gathers was one of the most electrifying players in college basketball, leading the nation in both scoring and rebounding the year before his death, a rare double achieved by only one other player in NCAA history. He had been diagnosed with a heart arrhythmia earlier that season after collapsing briefly during another game and was placed on beta blocker medication, though he had reportedly reduced his dosage on his own because it made him feel sluggish and less explosive on the court. During a 1990 conference tournament game, Gathers threw down an alley-oop dunk, jogged back down the court, and collapsed near midcourt in front of a national television audience. Medical staff attempted resuscitation for nearly an hour, both courtside and at the hospital, before he was pronounced dead. The autopsy confirmed hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, an abnormal thickening of the heart muscle that disrupts its electrical signals and can trigger sudden fatal arrhythmias during intense exertion. He was only 23. His death led many U.S. colleges to introduce mandatory cardiac screening for incoming athletes. Loyola Marymount, in a decision that stirred debate at the time, chose to finish out the season and reach the Elite Eight, with players saying they were playing in his honor rather than ignoring what had happened. Ayrton Senna is widely considered one of the greatest Formula One drivers in history, a three-time world champion known for his intensity and near mystical feel for a car's limits. In 1994, he was leading the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola when his Williams car suddenly left the track at the high-speed Tamburello corner, a section drivers had complained about for years. The car struck a concrete retaining wall at roughly 135 miles per hour. A piece of the car's suspension broke through the cockpit and pierced Senna's helmet, causing a fatal skull fracture and severe brain trauma. He was airlifted to a hospital and pronounced dead a few hours later, though Italian authorities did not officially confirm the death until that evening. His death came one day after fellow driver Roland Ratzenberger died in qualifying at the same race weekend, the first fatal F1 weekend in over a decade, and it triggered sweeping safety reforms, including redesigned cockpits, softer track barriers, and the FIA's dedicated safety research body, still active today. Senna and Ratzenberger remained the last drivers to die from injuries sustained in a Grand Prix race itself for 2 decades, until Jules Bianchi died in 2015 from injuries suffered in a 2014 race crash, prompting yet another round of cockpit safety upgrades. Benny Kid Paret, the reigning welterweight champion, was fighting Emil Griffith for a 3rd time in a nationally televised 1962 title bout at Madison Square Garden. Tension between the two fighters had escalated after Paret used a homophobic slur against Griffith at the televised weigh-in, an incident many boxing historians believe fueled the ferocity of the final round. In the 12th round, Griffith trapped Paret against the ropes and landed a barrage of unanswered punches, by some counts more than 24 in roughly 6 seconds, before referee Ruby Goldstein stopped the fight. Paret slipped into a coma immediately and never woke up. He died 10 days later from massive brain hemorrhaging. The fight, broadcast live to a national audience on NBC, led directly to tighter rules requiring referees to stop fights sooner and to closer physician monitoring of fighters absorbing repeated unanswered blows. Emil Griffith, who went on to have a long championship career, said in later interviews that the incident haunted him for the rest of his life, and the two men's families reportedly reconciled decades afterward. Nodar Kumaratashvili, a 21-year-old Georgian luger, was competing in a training run ahead of the 2010 Vancouver Winter Olympics on the Whistler Sliding Center track, which was designed to be the fastest in Olympic history. Coming out of the final curve at roughly 90 miles per hour, Kumaratashvili lost control and was ejected from his sled. He flew off the track and struck an unpadded steel support column meant to hold up the roof, rather than the padded safety barriers positioned elsewhere on the course. He died almost instantly from massive blunt force trauma. Olympic officials made emergency changes to the track before competition began, including raising the walls and altering the ice profile at that exact curve, and reduced the men's start position for the remainder of the games. The tragedy reignited long-running debates within the sliding sport community about how far organizers should push speed for the sake of spectacle. It was one of only a handful of athlete deaths at a Winter Olympics in the modern era, and the International Luge Federation later acknowledged the track's design and speed had exceeded what safety margins should have allowed. Marco Simoncelli, a charismatic Italian MotoGP rider nicknamed Sick, was competing in the 2011 Malaysian Grand Prix at Sepang. Exiting the 4th corner on lap 2, his rear tire lost grip and the bike slid sideways across the racing line, directly into the path of 2 trailing riders, Colin Edwards and Valentino Rossi. Both collided with him at high speed, and the impact tore his helmet from the head, exposing him to direct trauma to the head, neck, and chest. Medical teams reached him on track within seconds and airlifted him to the circuit's medical center, but he could not be resuscitated. He was pronounced dead shortly after, at age 24. The race was immediately red-flagged and later canceled entirely, an unusual step in MotoGP, and the tragedy led to stricter track limit rules and revised rider recovery protocols following a fall at speed. Valentino Rossi, one of the riders involved in the collision, later said he could not bring himself to watch footage of the crash again, and Simoncelli's number 58 has since been retired from MotoGP competition. Marc-Vivien Foe, a Cameroonian international midfielder who had also played for Manchester City and West Ham, collapsed without any contact from another player during a 2003 FIFA Confederations Cup semi-final against Colombia, in the center circle in the 72nd minute. Television cameras captured him falling face first with no one near him, and the broadcast initially continued before commentators realized the severity of what had happened. Medical staff administered CPR on the pitch for nearly 45 minutes, watched by a stunned stadium in Lyon, before he was pronounced dead. Like Hank Gathers, The cause was hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, an undiagnosed thickening of the heart muscle that had gone undetected in prior fitness screenings. His death, captured on live international broadcast, accelerated the adoption of mandatory pre-participation cardiac screening for professional footballers across major leagues in Europe and beyond. FIFA and Confederations Cup organizers ultimately decided to complete the tournament, and Cameroon's team went on to reach the final in his memory, wearing black armbands throughout the remaining matches. Owen Hart, a WWE performer wrestling under the comedic gimmick, the Blue Blazer, was set to be lowered into the ring from the arena rafters via a quick-release stunt harness during a live 1999 pay-per-view broadcast called Over the Edge. He had expressed discomfort with the stunt beforehand. According to several colleagues who spoke publicly afterward, the harness's release mechanism malfunctioned and disengaged prematurely roughly 78 feet above the ring. Hart fell and struck the top rope before landing in the ring in front of the live audience, suffering catastrophic internal injuries. He was rushed to a hospital but could not be saved and was pronounced dead shortly after, at age 34. The broadcast continued for a period after his fall while officials tried to determine what had happened, drawing significant criticism afterward. And his death led WWE to permanently ban that type of aerial entrance stunt from all future events. His widow later reached a settlement with the company and the harness manufacturer, and his family has remained vocal critics of how the promotion handled the immediate aftermath of that. Night. Dale Earnhardt, NASCAR's 7-time champion known as the Intimidator, was running third on the final lap of the 2001 Daytona 500 when his car was clipped from behind, sending him into the outside wall in what appeared on television to be a relatively survivable impact compared to other more violent-looking crashes earlier that same race. His car struck the wall nearly head-on at around 155 to 160 miles per hour. The sudden deceleration caused a basilar skull fracture, an injury common in high-speed frontal impacts and one that had already killed several other NASCAR drivers in prior years. He was pronounced dead within about 2 hours. The death of the sport's most recognizable driver led NASCAR to mandate head and neck restraint devices for all drivers within 2 years and to redesign track walls with energy-absorbing safer barriers, now standard at ovals nationwide. He was the 4th NASCAR driver to die from a basilar skull fracture in less than a year, a grim statistic that made the safety overhaul feel less like a reaction to one crash and more like an overdue reckoning for the entire sport. During the 1955 24 Hours of Le Mans endurance race, driver Pierre Levegue's Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR struck the rear of another competitor's car at high speed while attempting to avoid it, launching Levegue's car into the air and directly into a packed spectator embankment along the main straight. The car disintegrated on impact, and its magnesium alloy body ignited into an intense fire that firefighters initially tried to extinguish with water, worsening the blaze since burning magnesium reacts violently with it. Levegue was killed instantly, and the wreckage and debris fire killed at least 83 spectators, though some sources cite figures as high as 84, with more than 100 others injured, making it by far the deadliest single accident in motorsport history. The disaster prompted Mercedes-Benz to withdraw entirely from motor racing for over 3 decades and led to sweeping new safety regulations for circuit design and spectator barriers that reshaped international motorsport. Despite the scale of the tragedy, race organizers controversially chose to continue the event rather than halt it, reasoning that stopping the race would have caused spectators to flood the exits and blocked ambulances from reaching the injured. That decision remains debated by historians and safety experts to this day, and the crash still stands as the single deadliest disaster in the history of organized motorsport worldwide.